Welcome to another episode of the Marley Mac Media Music Production Podcast with your host, Marlon McPherson, aka Marley Mac. And this podcast is about music production and the music industry, especially for DIY independent musicians. So if you fit the bill and you'd like to keep abreast of the content that comes out on this podcast, please feel free to subscribe and share this podcast with someone. So in this episode, what I'll be talking about is getting started easily in music production. And this is a topic that I've done a video series which was quite popular and still is quite popular on YouTube. So if you want to check that out, go ahead and search my YouTube channel or just put in Google "Getting Started in Music Production," which is the title of the series. And you should see me up in the top results, maybe number one, or maybe not far down from number one. So you can check out that video or those videos. They've been up there for a while now, a good few months or a couple of years, I believe. I'm going to probably do an up-to-date version of that series. But for now, what I'm going to do is address that topic somewhat inside this episode, so people that are listening that are looking to get their feet wet, get started, they can at least have some idea of where to start and what my take is on that. So the first thing that you need to consider when starting with music production is the hardware. And in 2019 we are looking at making sure we need to have good decent computers. And what I would refer to as a good computer is one that has good processing power, enough RAM, enough storage, right? So in terms of RAM, I would say don't go less than 8 gigs of RAM. And for internal storage and external storage, you want to have enough space internally to be able to install all these apps that you're going to download. So for example, your DAW will take up quite a decent amount of real estate in terms of storage, plus it might come with sounds as well, sound packs, etc., that you might need to download and install, which might take up loads and loads of gigs. So these days, having at least, I would say, maybe a 500 gig internal storage, whether this is a hard disk drive or an SSD drive, which I do recommend going for SSD drives if you can afford to get that now, because they don't have moving parts. So it's less likely that they're going to crash on you, and they can take a bit more bumps if you were to knock your computer or something like that, or if you're moving around, if you're on a laptop. External storage is obviously very important because you want to be able to back up your work and not have everything stored on your computer. So you need to duplicate things off onto an external hard drive, at least one external hard drive. My workflow is I have external hard drives that I back up my work onto, and I also have cloud storage. I use Google Drive, which I do have more than the 15 gigs free, but that's something you can start out with 15 gigs if you sign up to Google Drive, or if you've got a Google account, you would automatically have access to a Drive app, which is connected with your email. Now, they do have really cheap plans starting from like $2 if you're in the US, or approximately £2 per month. And I think you get like 100 gigs. So that's quite a significant bump. Now, another alternative to backing up, it's not as convenient as Google Drive, but you could use Amazon S3, so you could check that out. I use that within my business for various reasons, and I do store some files on there as well, which is not related to my business. So typically it's designed to store files for websites and files for applications, but you could utilize it to upload your music production files, and especially the ones you want to just archive once you've finished with them and you're not going to need to download them constantly. So in terms of computer hardware, I would say obviously make sure you have those things. Now, if you want to go mobile, there are capable devices out there now that can actually do full-fledged music production, so you don't have to do that on your computer or on your desktop or laptop computer. For example, I have an iPad. It's actually an iPad Pro, but you can do this with an iPhone or a regular iPad as well, where you can actually download software or apps like Cubase 2. You've got Beatmaker 3. Those are the two that I mainly use. There's Aurea as well, which is more for mixing. And there's a whole host of third-party plugins and instruments that you can actually download, and they can interconnect. For Android users, I'm actually an Android user as well. There aren't too many apps that are good that are out there for Android, at least not for now, because Android, I think it's something to do with the development and the compatibility of apps communicating together. They don't have the same luxury of doing that. They don't have any interconnectivity that's reliable enough for them to develop apps for music production on. So iOS provides that, and that's why you have a very mature system on iOS that you can actually use just like you would use your desktop computer to do music production. And there's so many plugins and instruments that you can get on there as well. So if you want to go down that route, it's a great way, cost-effective way as well, because a lot of the plugins do not cost as much as they do on the desktop. So you'll be able to save a lot more money if you were to use the mobile versions or the iOS versions of some of the apps. So regarding other hardware, I would say get yourself a MIDI keyboard. For those of you who don't know what a MIDI keyboard is, it's basically a keyboard that doesn't actually have a built-in sound module, so it doesn't make sounds on its own. What it does is it connects to your hardware device, your computer, or let's say the iOS device, and it triggers the sounds within the software. So it has to communicate with the software, and you can record obviously into the notes that you're playing onto the keyboard will record into your software. So when you're choosing a DAW, I'm going to say that you need to look for some of the very basic things, such as having the compatibility with third-party plugins, so you can bring in your own plugins that doesn't come with the DAW. I'll get more into that in just a moment, but before I do that, I'm skipping over some of the other basic stuff like headphones. I'm not even saying speakers. Get some headphones. If you get some good quality headphones that you can hear a good frequency range, it doesn't necessarily have to be a studio headphone, but it's better to have a studio headphone where it's more of a flat signal, so you don't have to so you're not overcompensating when you're doing tweaks, because a lot of the consumer headphones do have boosts in terms of the bass or the bass or the treble, so it can fool your ears into thinking that, oh, something's too loud, and you turn down the bass. But when you actually listen back to the track on something else, it might not sound well balanced, because you're not using a well balanced pair of headphones. Now, I use headphones a lot when I'm doing my music, simply because I don't have the convenience of having a dedicated studio where I can turn up my music quite loud or anything like that. So for practicality reasons, for moving around and traveling, I just have headphones. So you can perfectly get music done just using the headphones. But if you have the space and you have the a setup that you want to go for, you can get studio monitors as well. You'll obviously need to have a microphone. A good condenser mic could work, and you'll need an audio interface to go into your hardware device if you're going to plug in a mic, condenser mic, which requires power. So bear that in mind as well. And in terms of hardware, that's all I'm going to mention in this section here. So now I'm going to take a quick break and talk about my sponsor. So this episode of the podcast has been sponsored by MarleyMacMedia.com, which is obviously my website. So MarleyMacMedia.com is a website that you can find resources and content related to music production. So if you want to get sound packs for Ableton Live and for Logic Pro, as well as other information and things like that that will keep you on track for making great music, check out MarleyMacMedia.com, and that's who's sponsoring this episode of the podcast here. So now we're going to talk about the software side of things, and it can be very expensive to get a DAW software. You do need a DAW, which is the Digital Audio Workstation, that stands for, and all that means is that it's your music production software. It's what you're going to record in, and it's what you're going to use to edit and arrange and effect your music. So things you need to look for inside a DAW is the ability to record or bring in audio, which I pretty much think all of them does that, as well as to record MIDI clips. Now, MIDI stands for Musical Instruments Digital Interface, which is the way that hardware devices communicate, like keyboards, drum pads, etc., that doesn't have their own built-in modules, like I mentioned before. They send that type of signal or data to the software, and it tells it what to do with the sound modules that's built into the computer. So making sure you have that ability. And again, I think pretty much all of them, well, if you're looking at something like Audacity, which could be classified as a DAW, or Adobe's Audition, they only do audio. So you need to look for something that does have MIDI if you're planning to record electronic music via using instruments which are MIDI compatible. You need to make sure you have third-party plugin compatibility as well. So this is where you can have extended sounds or extended effects that doesn't come built in to the DAW. So you will be able to then add ones that you've downloaded, whether for free. There's a whole host of them for free, and obviously there's premium ones as well, which can add up to quite a lot of money. But if you check my YouTube channel, again, I did do a series on some free plugins. I'll try to put that in the show notes as well. But if you just Google free VST plugins or free plugins for music production, there's going to be lots of information online that relates to what people are using. Now, for effects, I would say that you need to look out for very basic stuff like equalizers. You need to have an EQ, which allows you to control frequencies, so your highs, your mids, your lows. Compressors are other types of plugins or effects that controls dynamics. So if you are going to record some drums, or if you are doing vocals, you would need to add a compressor to it normally to kind of bring down the high peaks in the sound and bring up the low parts of the sound as well, to make it sound a bit more uniformed and a bit more professional. And that's what a compressor does in a nutshell, basically. And other things you'll need are limiters. So a limiter controls the loudness of a track, and standard things like reverb and delay or echo are things that you would add to your sound to make it a little bit more professional. These things can ruin your sound as well, so you need to make sure that you use them sparingly and use your ears. So with regards to DAW softwares, I've got a couple that I'm going to mention here that you can download right now for free, and they're professional, and you can use them to make professional quality music. So one that I've just learned about being free today is called Cakewalk. Now, Cakewalk has been around for a while, and I believe it has been a paid product for some time. I believe so. But seemingly they've made it free now. So Cakewalk is basically a multi-track recorder, and they are you can find them at bandlab.com. So Bandlab is the company that makes Cakewalk. And what you'll find is that you have unlimited tracks on here. You have a great sound engine on here as well. And it has some apparently or supposedly studio quality effects. I haven't tested this out yet because there's a caveat. Cakewalk is only available on Windows. Now, I'm a Mac user, so I haven't been able to install it. But I know there's going to be a lot of Windows users out there. So this is your gift right now. This is a free gift to you. Free information from me, obviously, but it's free from BandLab. So thanks to BandLab for making it free. Now, if you just want to get your feet wet, learn about how things connect together, how music production works, how the tracks work, how you can record, how you can do all these things, this is a good way to start. Now, for those of you, and by the way, you can bring in third-party plugins and all the things that I've mentioned before. I don't think these the effects that these come with are pretty much, from what I can see, I'm on the website now. You do have effects there for mixing and mastering. So I'd imagine you have the things like limiters, limiters, compressors, EQs, that sort of thing. But it doesn't mention any instruments. So then that's where you need to start looking at VST plugins or third-party plugins that you can then use in conjunction with this to have synthesizer sounds, keyboard sounds, bass sounds, whatever it is to make sounds to actually play your music into this. So yeah, there you go. So then the other one that I've got for you I want to mention is Reaper. Reaper, you can find that at reaper.fm. Now, I've used Reaper. I've tested this out. Reaper is free to download, but it's not actually free. It's you can assess it for some time. So I think it's about 60 days you have to assess it. And then what will happen is that it will ask you to buy it. And they've got 2 licenses. From what I can see, one's $60 and the other one is $200+, right? The difference is one is for commercial use, and they stipulate what they classify as commercial use on the website. So if you check that out, you will understand. And the $60 is a discounted price for non-commercial use. So theoretically, you could use this without actually paying for it, because the pop-up, once it comes up to say you need to purchase this, if you've finished evaluating it, you can just clear that off the screen and it will still work, in my experience. So again, this is a great way to get started. But if you use it, if you love it, why not just purchase it? This does come with plugins as well for effects, as well as it has, I'm pretty sure it has a sampler, and I believe it might have a synthesizer built in as well, as far as I can remember. So check that out. And pretty much that's all I've got to talk to you about inside this episode. The final thing that I'm going to say in closing is that when you decide to start music production, you need to kind of like figure out where you want to go with it. And based on that, you can kind of know what you need to get to add to your arsenal and what you need to learn. Whether you want to do this as a hobby or professionally, the best way to learn is to actually dig in and start figuring things out. There's lots of content online. There's lots of videos on pretty much all these pieces of software that you can learn from, including my content. Just dig in, start learning, and actually share. Don't just keep it on your hard drive or on your computer. Share the information, share the music that you make. And this is going to help you to get valuable feedback. And this is how you're going to learn and grow. So, that's what I've got for you inside this episode of the podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll catch you soon. Take care.